This is the Bush Whisperer coming at you from the beautiful Penguin Sanctuary, southern tip of Africa, Simonstown, Cape Town, Boulders Beach. It's a damp, grey, beautiful day. What an amazing dawn, sunrise. I'm here with my little boy, and I thought to talk to you today about disease. Whenever there's a change of the seasons, there's always the colds and flus and various different ailments that people suffer from. Thought to consider disease a little more closely. What it is. What are these foreign bodies that invade our bodies and cause terrible symptoms that we do not enjoy? The symptoms are always actually the solution to the problem, believe it or not. So next time you're wheezing and coughing or you're suffering, realize that's your body's solution to fixing a problem. The problem being that there's a foreign body invading the body, one that is creating a disharmony or disbalance, or unbalancing the system, shall we say. So, how does disease grow? What causes it? In order to understand this, we're going to look at ants for a moment. Understanding geomagnetism of the earth is going to help us to get a sense of perspective. The geomagnetism, as we can see it drawn on a two-dimensional graph, is looking like a wave. But the wave is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional effect. It's effectively a spiral that's oscillating in and out, while it's moving, creating a three-dimensional wave, represented two-dimensionally in the way that we know it. When you can visualize it, it helps. And where the expansion of the cycle reaches its peak, there is what we call a positive life force charge. And where it reaches its contraction point, there's a negative life force charge. And we're dealing here with the Ida and the Pingala and the confluence of the astral and the etheric. This is quite important to understand, for the forces of creation and destruction are in a state of total harmony and balance in order for life to exist. So entropy is as much a part of the process of life as anentropy is. And to gain an understanding of how these principles work, once again, we've got to look at subatomic particles and hydrogen specifically, the ions of hydrogen. Where the wavelength is in its contraction point and the tip of the wave is in the low point, shall we say, you will find, good morning, you will find that there's a collection of these hydrogen ions, these positively charged hydrogen ions. And these positively charged hydrogen ions cause terrible destruction to biological life. The negatively charged hydrogen ions are on the peak of the wave. This is what we call the positive charge, the hydroxyls. These are the positively affecting life force. And they're negatively charged, they're giving off electrons. And the hydroniums, is that right? Hydroniums, I think that's what they're called. The positively charged hydrogen ions create a dissident effect. If you observe ants will build their homes and their castles and their cities in a place where there's a collection of the hydroniums, the positively charged hydrogen ions, because ants need to farm mold. And the farming of mold is how they produce their food. They're very clever ants. They're farmers, essentially. So they're farming mold under the ground. And in order for the mold to thrive, a high concentration of the hydroniums, or the positively charged hydrogen ions, are fundamental. Now, when we're measuring alkalinity and acidity, what we're actually testing for is this exactly. The hydronium versus the hydroxyl count. And when there's a high hydroxyl count, it's considered to be positively charged. Negatively charged ions, which means that it's alkaline. And the acidity is in the presence of these positively charged hydroniums. And so acidity is effectively the environment that will attract entropic life forms. Entropic life forms, and this is something to consider. Life forms are either entropic or anentropic. Biologically, mammals are anentropic. We thrive in an alkaline space, or where there's a balance that moves towards the alkalinity. And the entropic life forms thrive where the balance is moving towards the acidity. And the dictating factor are these hydrogen ions. So when one is drinking coffee, as an example, I had a conversation with a gentleman on the beach just some minutes ago about this. And he was mentioning that he had started drinking coffee, and he's a senior gentleman. I pointed out that that's the fastest way for him to die on the beach. Because he said, well, he hoped he died on the beach where we were standing. And I said, well, if you keep drinking coffee, you might get your wish. And that is essentially what we're talking about when we're looking at disease. Disease can't thrive in an alkaline environment. The bacteria required for viruses, the bacteria required to facilitate the disease, most diseases, don't thrive in an environment where the hydroxyls are present. The hydroniums are fundamental to the entropic life forms, and these entropic life forms are fundamental to the breakdown and the decay of all things. And without the entropy, things would just keep growing and growing and growing and growing, and there wouldn't be a curtailment, and cell reproduction and cell living and dying wouldn't be able to happen in order to renew the cells in the body. And since the cells have a shelf life, the entropic life forms are fundamental. However, our daily habitual diets and the way that we live tend to be generating more of these entropic environments. And so we tend to be more acidic than alkaline within ourselves, and this is quite a serious problem. Most of our diet, most of the processed food, the things that we eat, generally generate these hydronium ions within the body. And these hydronium ions then create an environment suitable for bacteria to be attracted to the environment in order to set up shop. So if you want to be healthy, consider the alkalinity in your body. Now, you've heard this before. We all know that we shouldn't be acidic. Now we understand why. And the geomagnetism of the earth is a clue. You can see that there's some places where your garden will thrive. Let's say you've got a vegetable garden, and you put it in one part of your property and the vegetables won't grow. You need to dowse. Get out your pendulum, get your dowsing rods, or walk around the property until you feel a shift, a change from that environment. And then you will notice that if you put your garden there, they will thrive, because these electromagnetic waves that move through the earth, once again, the wavelength, the troughs are collection points for hydroniums, and the peaks are collection points for hydroxyls. Now, hydroxyls actually stimulate the anentropic life forms and produce health and growth, and actually generates the life force charge that is healthy. What we call the Pingala charge is very powerful. And the hydroxyls generate the Ida charge. To understand that you can actually observe the Ida and the Pingala in nature, you can track it with biochemistry. The alchemists of the old were very aware of this. The shaman understands this innately. For the shaman lives in nature, and the shaman observes nature, and the shaman observes that there are places where certain plants won't grow, places where other types of life will thrive. Observes that ants tend to all live in congregations, and you can actually track the lines of ant cities, and they're actually intelligently designed. The ants know exactly what they're doing. The shaman observes the ants. When I was living in the jungles, training, I spent years of my life in the jungles. I observed the way ants lived under the ground and the way they collected their food, and it made me want to question things. what are the ants doing with all of these little bits of food? What are they taking these leaves? Are they really eating leaves? And this is why I was interested in understanding how ant farms exist. Though one can also realize that if one's eating living food, the living food tends to carry the charge of the hydroxyls and puts these hydroxyls into the body directly. And this actually has a counteracting effect, producing the alkaline charge more powerfully in the body. And thus, the positive point of the life force can actually produce the growth and generation in the body that is required. Obviously, the balance is fundamental. If one gets too alkaline, one can get sick. One can simply overcharge one's body with too much of the positive life force, and that can actually become toxic. So balance and harmony is always the key. However, we've moved away from balance, we've moved away from harmony, and we've become ingrained and stuck in this way of life, of understanding that it's easier to just get processed food, it's easier to get other people to handle your food for you. But is it really easier, or does it make life more difficult? This is the Bush Whisperer, sharing a few words about diet, health, and I hope you get something from this. I hope you have an absolutely gorgeous day. Enjoy the weekend. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.